Welcome into a hump day edition of Daily Faceoff Live. The show, as always, is a presentation of Bet365. Download the app today. Use the promo code NATION. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Over in the Daily Faceoff YouTube, we are looking for your inbox questions. Fire them our way with the hashtag askdfo. As always, I'm Tyler Remchuk. He is Frank Saravalli. And Frank, we started the show with some breaking news out of Pittsburgh.
Yeah, also not surprising. Tristan Jarry, the Pittsburgh Penguins, announced will be placed on waivers at 2:00 Eastern today. It's mind-numbing to think about the mistakes that Kyle Dubas made in his first few months as general manager in his tenure. The Jarry contract and the Erik Karlsson trade will go down to haunt that organization for a long time. And Tristan Jarry getting the same treatment as Jack Campbell. He was sent to the AHL on a conditioning stint earlier this season after a tough 3 games right out of the chute. Since then, he has come back and 18 games played with an .893 save percentage. Not good.
No, not good at all. And if you're wondering, would a team claim Tristan Jarry? 3 more years, $5.3 million. There is no shot.
$15 million in real cash, too. So,
yeah. It's a good day for us to have our goaltending expert, Carter Hutton, on. He'll swing by in a little bit, give us his take on a few things, including our Dominion Lending Center's poll question, which is, does Connor Hellebuyck belong on the Mount Rushmore of goalies? And Frank, we can kind of start there because last night, Connor Hellebuyck was excellent again. In fact, it was the 2 Connors fueling the Winnipeg Jets to a victory over the Vancouver Canucks. A natural hat trick for Kyle Connor. He pops home 3 goals, finishes with 4 points, and Connor Hellebuyck gives up a goal in the third, stops 22 of 23. They were both excellent, and the Jets pick up another win.
Hey, Jets are just cruising right along. I mean, they looked like the team, and we'll get into the Vancouver portion of this in a second, but they looked like the team that was way hungrier for this game. And Connor Hellebuyck just continues on his march. .958 save percentage last night. Ho-hum. No, not a big deal. I mean, it's really impressive what he does on a night in and night out basis. And the Vezina is just, unfortunately, not really much of a debate. It's not even a conversation.
No, I mean, look at the odds we have at the bottom of this graphic from Bet365. And again, we'll chat with Hutz in a bit about the Vezina competition. You can't even call it that. It's basically a conversation of who else do you have on your ballot, Hutz? Because what Connor Hellebuyck has done is quite frankly insane. The gap between him and second place when it comes to save percentage in the NHL is bigger than any other gap in the top 30. Like it's stunning, Frank. Like every game, he's unbelievable.
And look, the Jets, here's the best part about their story this season is they're far from a team that's just reliant on their goaltending. Their scoring has been at a pace that I just not sure that I would have believed heading into the season.
Yeah, and obviously Kyle Connor, the second Connor in this conversation, is a big part of that. He is now tied for 3rd in the NHL in goals. The Jets have scored more goals than anybody else in the Western Conference. And again, even that's not even particularly close. They have 11 more than the second place Vegas Golden Knights in that column. So lots going right now in Winnipeg. The team they beat, the Vancouver Canucks, Frank, you talked about being hungry. The Canucks, sure, points in 7 of 10. But only 3 wins in their last 10. And last night was about as far from an inspiring effort as you can get.
Yeah, and that's kind of the toughest part to figure out about this Canucks season. Getting Phil Hronek back, moving in the right direction in terms of health, and had actually played pretty decent the last few games. Then you get a night like last night where they lay an egg. And I've never seen a team where you can define more about their status and what their night's going to look like than looking at their body language. I'm sure that that's going to drive Coach Rick Tocchet crazy and probably does. But look, this Canucks team is in a dogfight and not one that we necessarily expected them to be in, but they've now been passed by the Calgary Flames in both points and points percentage. And Calgary's getting the goaltending from Dustin Wolf, which we can also talk to Carter Hutton about, but they're getting the goaltending. And if that continues, as much as that team has struggled to score, they may not be reeling off tons of wins, but they're also not having the dips in their schedule that the Canucks are experiencing and the lows that they're having. So they're going to be in tough if they don't figure it out pretty soon.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you on that front. Let's talk about some other results from last night and some heaters that came to an end. The Detroit Red Wings 7-game winning streak falls at the hands of the San Jose Sharks, a 6-3 win for San Jose. But hey, Detroit, that is still a great beginning to Todd McClellan's tenure as their head coach. They've gotten themselves back in the playoff mix. You saw the Calgary Flames out west also lose their little winning streak. They fell 2-1 to the St. Louis Blues. But I guess I'll start by asking you about Detroit, Frank, and we might get into this a little bit later on in the week with our pal John Goyens. But this turnaround in them under Todd McLellan, you think this is legit?
Legit to an extent. Do I think the Red Wings are a contender? No. Do I think they can make the playoffs? Yes. I mean, they were right there last year, a point back. And the Morning Cup of Hockey guys had Ken Daniels on earlier this week to talk about their like last season and this season and how it's all unfolding. And it's kind of painful to remember how close Detroit was to making the playoffs. That last night of the season, so many things happening. And I see no reason why they can't be that team this year that breaks through and grabs that 8th seed, or potentially could even catch whoever's in 7th. But they're still a flawed team. And that's kind of what we keep coming back to, is that defense needs to improve significantly. I think the structure that they're going to play with under Todd McLellan as a consistency thing, that part can be worked out and will certainly help support a team that is as, I think, tough on the back end as any other.
Another team in the East I wanted to throw your way quickly was the New York Rangers. They were about 90 seconds away from beating the Colorado Avalanche last night. They end up losing in OT, but they do have points in 6 straight. Again, that record in their last 10, not great, or sorry, points in 5 of their last 6, but they're kind of just like you. I love your line, milk, milk, squirt, squirt, Frank. They're bringing games to overtime. They're picking up 2 points here and there. They're still closer to the bottom of the conference than to a playoff spot. But has any part of this last 10 days inspired you at all with the Rangers?
Well, I think they're still way better than what they've shown. I mean, look, this team still has a lot of the core pieces. And by the way, you get Chris Kreider back. Like, hopefully he's healthy and re-energized. And if I had to pick one team that's in the muck, and I'd love to know what their odds are on Bet365, if I had to pick one team that's in the muck to make the playoffs, my money would still be on the Rangers.
It's just the upside there, right? Like, we know that group of players has something much better in them. They've shown us in not that long ago, they've shown us that they're one of the elite teams in the league going on that run that they did last year. Our friends at Bet365 currently have them at plus 200 to make the playoffs, minus 250 to miss out. Another
plus
team
200, like, what are some of the other odds looking like?
I mean, so they're better than the Islanders. The Senators are the favorites to grab that spot at minus 160.
No
Another
value
team
there.
Can I give you one that, and this was the team I wanted to talk to you about. I should have looked at these odds earlier. Columbus is plus 500, Frank.
Well, I think a lot of people are looking at this in a similar way, which has been great story and might hang in until early March, but might not have the goods to actually complete the task. And that would be a fair comment to make. I think everyone's just still sleeping on Marchenko, unbelievably enough. The old fire poker goal last night. Are you kidding me?
That was pretty nasty. Zach Werenski scores twice for the Blue Jackets as well. They scoop up another victory, make it 5 in a row for Columbus, 8-2 in their last 10. Let's talk a little trade deadline here, Frank. First off, our deadline countdown article, which is out now at dailyfaceoff.com. Deadline destinations for the number one guy on your board, Brock Nelson. Colorado, Mini, Dallas, Toronto, and Winnipeg were the 5 teams that Larkin had on his list. Frank, why don't you maybe throw me, like, we've talked so much about what a great fit he'd be in Minnesota. We know Colorado's looking for middle six help down the middle. We know Winnipeg needs a second line center. Can you give me maybe a dark horse team outside of these 5 who you're going, keep an eye on them?
I don't necessarily have a dark horse team, but what if the Stars were able to do multiple things at once? What if they're able to go get a top 4 defenseman to add to their right side? And what if they're able to also bring in Brock Nelson down the middle? I mean, money-wise, they could afford it, and without the Islanders even really retaining. Like, they've got that flexibility with the Tyler Seguin LTIR. I just think this might be a multi-pronged attack from Dallas this year in terms of what they're able to attack and how much that might transform a team. Like, if you needed to, and not saying they will, but if you needed to, could you stick Brock Nelson on the wing for a playoff run? I think you probably could.
I think you absolutely could. has a little bit of experience on the wing in the past. I see no reason why that couldn't happen. Do you think the
And
Islanders?
what about an ideal fit though in Winnipeg? Like if you're thinking true second line center, so if you're the Jets and you could go Scheifele 1, Nelson 2, Adam Lowry 3, that's pretty good. I think that's just a whole other level. No disrespect to Sean Monahan, but I think that's a whole other level from what Winnipeg had last year when they brought Monahan in.
Yeah, I guess my question would be, and listen, they have the picks if they wanted to. They have each of their first rounders for the next 3 years. They're missing a second and a fourth in this upcoming draft. But do you think Kevin Cheveldayoff pushes chips into the middle for a second straight year?
I do, only because I think this draft isn't as good as previous years. And the idea of keeping a real late, let's say they're picking 27th or something, is what's better. Brock Nelson for a playoff run or 27th for a guy that may or may not even be something.
Hey, and I think that's a totally fair viewpoint as well. Let's talk about another Central Division team quickly here before we get to our guy, Carter Hutton. You had a chance to chat with Utah Hockey Club GM Bill Armstrong on your latest edition of Frankly Speaking. You can find the podcast wherever you get your podcasts from. We're going to run it here on the YouTube in a couple of hours as well. But you asked him about taking the bat off his shoulder. Let's take a sneak peek.
Will you be in a position where you can maybe take the bat off your shoulder and swing a bit this year at the deadline?
Yeah, we're always going to look at that. I think that's another good question, because teams can't figure out whether we're buying or selling, and our players will work that out for us as we move down the stretch here, pushing for a playoff spot. But we have the assets to swing, and if it's the right deal with the right timeline, with the right age, we're definitely going to try and become a championship organization and acquire championship players. So that for us is something we're going to take a swing all the time and take a look at. Just the same as things we did at the draft. We're going to again try and do that at the trade deadline. We'll see what's available, and if there's anything that makes our club better, we're going to certainly take a look at it.
$11 million, $11.6 million in current cap space, which could accrue to well north of $20 million by the deadline. You look at their draft picks, every single one of their picks for the first 6 rounds this year. Next year, they got a couple extra second rounders, an extra third. We talked when the change happened from Arizona to Utah. I was like, man, what kind of a GM could Bill Armstrong be now that, the shackles are kind of off for him? And we saw it, as he kind of alluded to, with the Sergachev deal in the summer. Do you think they're really serious about maybe doing something like that again?
Yeah, I do think they are. And I'll tell you this, Bill Armstrong is not a very popular GM amongst his peers. And the reason for that, we actually talked about it on the pod, is because he calls and he asks about top end players. And a lot of times the conversations are super short, and sometimes he even gets hung up on, I bet, where it's like, yeah, why are you calling about that guy? But that Sergachev deal is a great example, because maybe about 6 months before it ever even materialized at the draft, he had called and asked Tampa Bay about Sergachev. And months later, he gets a call back saying, hey, are you still interested? And if so, here's what we might be looking at. And you see a deal start to come together. I know for certain that Bill Armstrong has been making those types of calls this season. And I wouldn't be shocked. Let's just connect a dot. What about one of the guys in Vancouver that we've been talking about all year long? Utah has the pieces to get something like that done, and they're ready to take a swing and potentially add a game-changing player. I don't think there's a team in the NHL that's better well-positioned for the future than Utah Hockey Club. Draft picks, prospects, cap space, and they have star players already in their fold. That's a pretty dangerous combination.
Yeah, listen, I know we're not that far removed from Utah having to scrape the waiver wire just to put 6 NHL or close to NHL caliber defensemen in their lineup. But you mentioned John Marino's coming back. Sean Durzi is not that far away from coming back. Like, looking at that blue line, Sergachev, Marino, once Durzi's healthy, there's 3. Mata's played well since he's come there. Kesselring's legit. Maverick Lamoureux could be healthy again by the end of the month here. Like,
that's your 6.
There's your 6, and then you still have a Valimaki and an Ian Cole. Like, if they wanted to do a deal with Vancouver, one of the hurdles we've talked about with other teams and that kind of mix is, like, Vancouver doesn't want 2 first-round picks and a good prospect in this deal. They want help now. If Utah suddenly wants to dangle one of those defensemen, whether it's Marino, Durzi, or even someone like Kesselring, like, they could afford, now that they're healthy, to subtract a D-man off that roster to get scoring help.
And they've got other ones on the way, which is the scariest part. Like, they've got so many prospects, they're actually not even able to sign them all, to the point where they're getting calls left and right being like, which guys are you keeping? And if not, how can we trade for the rights to some of these other guys? So they're in a great spot. And I think you look at this year, Marino made his season debut last night, and Durzi is only a few weeks away. That's plenty of runway for this team to make the playoffs, given what we've talked about, how mushy it is in the West. To step up and pass Calgary or Vancouver for that 8th seed, I think it's entirely doable.
2-7-1 in their last 10, but like you said, getting healthy, and that could lead to a turnaround for Utah, who are currently 6 points out of a playoff spot. Your full interview with Bill Armstrong dropping on our DFO YouTube at the top of the hour. Let's get into a little goalie talk. It's the Blue Paint, and it's brought to you by Charm Diamond Centers, open since 1972 with more than 85 locations across Canada through Charm and their sister brands. You can get a custom ring built and delivered in less than 4 weeks with the Charm Masterpiece program. It all comes with their unbeatable pricing policy. For more information, go to charmdiamondcenters.com. Always a pleasure to welcome in Carter Hutton from the Starting Goalie Report on the Starting Goalies tab of dailyfaceoff.com, and a former NHLer. Huts, let's start with the Vezina. It's our mid-season awards week here on the show. And hey, listen, we love having you on, but the Vezina is the most boring award at this point because it's just all Connor Hellebuyck. He's running away with this. His numbers are unbelievable. Minus 4,000 versus the field. So let me throw you maybe a more intriguing question, and it would be our poll question. Is he a Mount Rushmore goalie for you if he wins another Vezina?
I think he's going to be in that category. He's one of those guys that has just been unbelievable. And I think for me, it's just going to be that little bit of a black cloud over him. Can he win a Stanley Cup? Can he get it done in playoffs? Right. And he's had good runs. He has good numbers in the playoffs. His winning record's not great. He's 18-27. But the fact of the matter is, it's just, we judge guys on what they can do in the playoffs. Right. And he's been a guy that's been a regular season monster, and especially looking back to last year, how they were exited by the Colorado Avalanche. And, he got shelled every game. So even this Four Nations Cup coming up, I think this is a big measuring stick for him to play well and, get the job done under the microscope. But man, he's been fun to watch, and it's been entertaining. A 929 and 6 shutouts already. So who knows what he does with the second half of this season here.
Trying to think who would be my Mount Rushmore. If I'm shaping out 4 faces in the side of the mountain, I'm probably going to go something like Dominic Hasek, Patrick Waugh, Martin Brodeur, and Glenn Hall. Would you fight me on any of those 4?
No, I think those are the guys, right? It depends on how many you want to have in there, especially when you start dating yourself further back. I guess I'm more biased more to the new age goalie. But again, I think those are the big names, and you can make that argument all day. I think those guys have to be included in it. And it'd be nice to do one just from like the 2000s on or something where you can make debate, I think, on like every 50 years, maybe making another Mount Rushmore.
Well, if you go from 1981 on, the only guys who've won back-to-back Vezinas at any point are Brodeur, Waugh, and Hasek. Hasek did it twice. He's got a 3-peat. Brodeur did it twice as well. But Hellebuyck could join that company if he wins it again this year.
Yeah, he could. And it's a high possibility, too, especially the other night. I think there's a little bit of exercising some demons against the Colorado Avalanche at home there, the way he played. He played very well, especially on a team that is on a heater right now since they've added Blackwood.
Here's the only difference when you're talking about someone like Hasek. He won back-to-back Hart trophies, though, too.
Yeah.
It's a whole other level. Like, for a 5-year period in time, he was the most valuable player in the game by a wide margin.
Yeah, I think at this point now, even this season, you have to put Connor Hellebuyck into that Hart conversation, right? I know there's always that topic they don't play every game, but if he keeps playing at the pace he's playing, he's going to be up in the 60s. And, I think he has to be legitimately in that conversation for the Hart.
Okay, so we've established Hellebuyck number 1 for Vezina. What would some of the other spots look like for you on your ballot? Like, give me 2, 3, and 4.
Oh, right now, I'd have to include Logan Thompson. I think just his record right now and what he's done for the Washington Capitals team, that would be a guy that I would include. 19, 2, and 3, those numbers are absurd. Yes, I think he hasn't played as many games as Hellebuyck, but you look at Washington, and I don't think there's many people that pictured them being as good as they've been, especially being first in the Metro and arguably one of the best teams in the Eastern Conference. And then I think, again, I mentioned earlier, I think Mackenzie Blackwood, what he's done to come in and how good he has played for Colorado since the trade over from San Jose is another guy that I would throw my hat in the ring again. Another win last night for him. And then the third guy for me, it gets tricky, right? There's so many different players that you could add into that. Is Philip Gustafsson. Yes, his last 3 haven't gone well. He's given up 14 goals in his last games, but he's still 18-8-3 again on a Minnesota team that has been missing guys, has been trying to find a way to establish themselves. So I feel like those are the big 3. And then, you can make an argument for a few other guys. And the other one for me would be Jacob Markstrom. I think just the fact of the matter, going to a team that missed the playoffs. Now Markstrom comes in, solidifies it. And I guess it's just the experience that he brings in the swagger. He's been absolutely rock solid, but I feel like during this second half is where we're really going to establish what teams and what goalies are on that extra ballot.
Okay, so we've been giving out some of our own awards all week. And yesterday, one of the things we talked about was the best move of the summer. And for me, I actually mentioned Philip Gustafsson and said it was the best move that wasn't made. The fact that Minnesota could have and thought about trading him and ended up keeping him. But the best goalie move of the offseason so far was what?
Oh, for me, obviously, I think I agree with you keeping Gustafsson, but for me, it's Markstrom. I think this is a team that wavered at times. They were younger, and it just goes to show you what experience can do, right? Jake Allen came in late, and I think Markstrom was always tied to this New Jersey team, I think from the trade deadline beforehand, like were the Flames going to move, and we're almost waiting for that ball to drop. And I think Fitzgerald to go out and make this move just to bring in his presence. Yes, they have brought in some important defensemen that have helped that team as well. But I just think having a presence of an experienced goalie, a big body from what they've dealt with a younger lineup has been just huge for this New Jersey's team confidence, and you see it in their play.
Let's talk a little bit about an up-and-comer here. We were doing our Calder conversation yesterday with Stephen Ellis, and he gave a lot of love to Dustin Wolf. His numbers are unreal. They're starting to crank up the workload a little bit in Calgary, too. How legit is this kind of first half of his first season in the league? Are we watching a star develop here?
I think we are. And I guess I would put a ceiling on him just based on his size, right? Like UC Saros and where he's at to really get into that upper echelon of guys winning Vezinas, but he's going to be a very good goalie for a lot of years to come. And he's shown us it in the American League. And I think this is a great example of giving guys time to like simmer in the American League and take their bumps and bruises and learn how to play. And he's done a great job in the American League. And for me, it's just his dynamic ability to make saves. And now I feel like this Calgary team's in limbo, right? They're in the 8th place, 9th place. Are they rebuilding where they're at? And I think a big problem of that is because of Dustin Wolf's play, where it almost be easier, I think, for Calgary fans to be down in the bottom and just be like, hey, at least we can sell guys off. And now it's like, are we a team that's going to make the playoffs? But I feel like any game that is important for the Calgary Flames is going to be important for Dustin Wolf's growth, as he is the man of the future, I think, for the Calgary Flames.
It's bizarre. I've never seen a market that wants to lose so bad.
I know, right?
They're like right there in the playoff mix, and it's this season that no one really saw coming, and yet everyone's kind of like disappointed. They're like, oh man, like what if we bottomed out? And I get the conundrum because it is difficult with how you trying to vault from where you are now to being a contending team. But that said, when you look at their goaltending picture, and Dan Vladar's numbers aren't good this year, they've got an option in front of him. He's a pending UFA. Do they re-sign him or do they trade him? And what would you do with Devin Cooley?
Yeah, so I think that's a chance where if you can get Dustin Wolf some more minutes and you're at a fact where he's going to keep developing and Vladar you're going to move on from, maybe he is a guy that somebody adds as a little bit of depth, right? There's always been talking that in Edmonton about Picard, what he can do. Vladar has that resume, so I think it's going to be interesting. And I look forward again. I know you talked with Bill Armstrong, a guy I got to play for in Arizona. He's awesome. He's got Vemelka there. Is he a guy that, is nailed down? I think the goalie landscape is so tricky right now because of the fact there's so many teams that are still in it, right? There's only a small amount of teams that are, kind of passed to the wayside. So it'll be interesting how the second half plays out as we near the trade deadline and teams look to add.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Utah because I was just going to say, you mentioned Vemelka and how he's kind of saved their season, right? Because Ingram, and he kind of finally revealed late last week the personal nature that he was dealing with behind the scenes and illness with his mom, and certainly thinking of him and his family. But his on-ice game had struggled this year. Vemelka, he was a pending UFA this year heading into the year, and everyone's thinking, okay, this is a guy that is probably going to fall by the wayside or be trade bait. His season this year, for the most part, has been really good, and he's helped keep them afloat. But both these guys now need new contracts. What do you do if you're Utah?
Yeah, I think this is a tough situation, right? You obviously decide on the upside of it. And I think Vemelka still has that upside. I don't know how old he is now. He might be 28 because I believe when he came over the year with me, he was 25. And he was a guy that looked ready for the NHL, ready for the jump. I loved his demeanor. I had a chance to be with him, around him, just the way he takes care of himself. So I feel like that experience is going to be huge. I think the only worrisome fact is when they gave him that contract that next year he wasn't as good as he needed to be, right? And it's a contract year. Now he's having a good year, but I think his upside is higher than Ingram's, in my personal opinion, just the way that he plays the game.
Let me quickly ask you about Tristan Jarry, placed on waivers today, just hasn't been able to find his game since signing that big contract. I would assume he's not getting claimed. I would assume he probably gets bought out in the summer as well. But where do you come out on Jarry? Do you see any bouncing back for him?
No, I think it's just been tried and tried and tried. And it seems like this has been a problem for a while, right? They gave him the big contract. I think it was $26 million over 5 years. It was a big deal and a thing he needed to really break out. And I know that the one summer he tried to redefine himself, and he's had good numbers over his career. Like he's got a 919. He's had different seasons of good numbers, but at 886 and 82nd on the money puck list for advanced analytics for a goalie is horrible, especially on a team that is that borderline. They need a good goalie if they want a chance to make the playoffs, right? So I think their money is better spent on a younger guy who has more upside. You see that right now in Ottawa with Levi playing well. Just a chance for someone else to come in and do that, especially when they're trying to manage the cap.
Huts, as always, appreciate your time. The blue paint brought to you by Charm Diamond Centers. Thanks for doing this.
Thanks, guys.
Keep cruising along. Get to our poll question results for Dominion Lending Centers. Is your mortgage up for renewal here in 2025? You can lock in the best rates and products with Dominion Lending Centers. Visit them online and find more information at dominionlending.ca. Frank, the poll question is Connor Hellebuyck on your Mount Rushmore. The Twitter was 63% saying no. Our YouTube chat, though, was basically dead split 50-50. Again, he probably needs some playoff or at least international success to really cement him. But the fact he could join an elite group of guys who've won back-to-back Vezinas, it makes it an interesting question to me.
It does. I'm going to go no, though. And for the 4 names that I mentioned, I think you have to have a nod to the past, and I think the fact that Brodeur and Waugh played into the 2000s, they're recent enough to give a nod to the modern day goalie as well. Hellebuyck has been unquestionably the best goalie of his generation, which I think is a really fair and fitting title. That said, you have to deliver when it comes to the playoffs. You can't just be a good regular season goalie, and he was really good for them in their run in 2018 to the West final, but he also had a few stinkers. And I can remember some games where he would come out afterwards and just absolutely flog himself in the media, and he'd say things that we'd react to. So I'm curious to see if he can get on an extended run and display a lot of the maturity that I think he has. And then moving forward, like build that, stack that on top of each other 1 year after the next, or one deep run after the next. And maybe you find a way to break through, because he's eminently capable of carrying his team to that Stanley Cup. And that's a big part. It's not a but. That's a big part of what Winnipeg has been banking on in keeping him and signing him to that deal.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me throw you an Ask DFO question. This one comes in from SK, who's always in the YouTube. Will Calgary continue to hold and hope, or are they going to sell, realizing they aren't anywhere close, take prospects, weaponize the cap space in the offseason to be strong next year? What do you make of that line of thinking? Because, hey, we keep hearing, it feels like there's like 10 fan bases around the league who go, ooh, what if Rasmus Andersson can shake loose? And all we hear from Calgary is like, we're not trading him.
Well, but I've been saying this for months, consistently, every single week. Anytime I'm asked, they're not trading Rasmus Andersson. Somehow yesterday that was news. But nonetheless, like, they have no interest in doing that, and they haven't. Every time it's come up, anytime a team has called, they've been rebuffed. We're not trading Andersson. I still think it's unlikely that they're trading another, bigger piece like a Nazem Kadri or anything like that. This team wants to be competitive, and they want to have a chance to win. They're in this spot. You might as well get in and make the most of it.
Yeah, absolutely. They are currently, as of right now, in the playoffs. Whether you look at points or points percentage, that 8th spot is theirs. Let's do our daily bets for Bet365. Download the app today. Use the promo code NATION. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. All I needed yesterday was a Werenski assist. He got 2 goals instead. Brutal. Anyways, the Minnesota Wild, Edmonton Oilers, I am going with the under here. I like Minnie's goaltending to bounce back, and Edmonton has actually been a pretty heavy under team as of late, so it ain't sexy, but I think it'll be a low-scoring affair between the Oilers and Wild tonight. Also, I like a little shot prop parlay. Give me Tage Thompson. Give me Leon Draisaitl. Played together, it's plus 164. Draisaitl is hit in 5 of 6. Thompson has hit in 5 straight. That brings us to garbage time, Frank, and the week of weird headlines continues. We had the Heineman news, him unfortunately getting hit by a car. We had Bunting earlier in the week getting in a traffic accident. Then yesterday, Evgeny Malkin's house was robbed. His 3 Stanley Cup rings are missing. The unfortunate headlines just keep rolling in, Frank.
Yeah, it's sad. I mean, the way that you see these athletes and high-profile celebrities have their houses be targeted at moments in time when you know they're not going to be home or very likely to not be home because they're at a game or whatever it might be. It's a sad state of affairs. There's no doubt about that, and wish there could be more done to protect them. And I'm sure a lot of them are taking their precautions. And it was interesting. I don't know if you follow Chris Pronger on Instagram, but he was recently in Finland for the holidays. And I just saw his post. Like he posted something about his dogs and how they've taken extra precautionary measures at their own home in St. Louis to basically guard against something exactly like this. So it's a shame that that's what it's come to in today's world, that that's what you need to do. But to see priceless mementos like those Stanley Cup rings disappear, there's just, you can get another one, but it's not quite the same. And I feel for Evgeny Malkin and his family, and I wish it wasn't like that.
Yeah. Again, you kind of said it. It happened earlier in the year to a bunch of NFLers as well. So unfortunate stuff, and certainly hoping Evgeny Malkin can get his Stanley Cup rings back. That is a wrap on today's edition of the show. Tomorrow, the coach, John Goyens, will swing by for the coach's room, and we'll break down a couple of games from the NHL, continue our trade deadline countdown as well. Everybody in the YouTube, you were great. We'll chat with you again tomorrow at noon Eastern. What's up, hockey fans? If you enjoyed that video, then you're going to want to hit the subscribe button to not miss any of our content. From daily live shows with Frank Saravalli to analysis from former NHLers to exclusive interviews with some of the biggest names in the hockey world on Frankly Speaking. You're going to want to hit that subscribe button and stay up to date with everything going on in the hockey world.